That's right. I always forget. But Donald Stojack is going to talk today with Anthony Warren about a big word. Are you ready for the big word? The big word is change. Okay. And, two old savory souls here going back and forth. Last number of emails that we've exchanged, and have determined that, one of the big holdups for everybody is change. And I want to approach this subject from a lot of different angles so that we can make use of it. Because I don't want to just have a conversation here and bring my wisdom and Anthony's and all of our wisdom together if we can't apply this. But I want you to think about change from a few levels. Okay. And number one, we need to make some money. So when you talk to somebody, there's going to be a potential client coming in to whatever you're selling, that they have to make a change often. And so sometimes the resistance to that change, it's not because you don't have a good offer, it's that they don't know how to embody change, to invest or take the time or, utilize that. So I want you to kind of think about it from that perspective. When you work with somebody, right, with whatever modality you work with somebody, or getting somebody to do something, your effectiveness is really hinging on the ability to get them oftentimes to change. Okay. Now let's call it all external, right? And the 800-pound gorilla is inside of each of us, is our ability around change. And this is where we need to look in the mirror really, really hard, because we all want to be more successful. And what is stopping us from being more successful? And I bet we can all almost, what do you say, evaporate the ice cubes down and see what's really on the table. And it's our resistance to change. So that's how I'm going to start today, Anthony. But, before we do, if you could tell us a little bit about who, and I say Anthony Warren, but in the UK, it's more Anthony. Is that a better pronunciation?
Well, yeah. It's just a family thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who's Anthony Warren, and whereabouts are you coming to us from today?
Okay, sure. Yeah. Well, I think the illustrious ancestor which gave the family name was actually a guy called Guillaume de la Varenne, who was the army commander for William the Conqueror. And back in the 10th century, he was like the most richest man in the country in terms of GDP. It was like 20%. And so he was a kind of interesting guy because he got stuff done, although I'm not sure about the motivation. It may have a different kind of collateral damage, but anyway, that's where it started from. And that French connection has actually been there most of my life. I went and worked in Paris for a while, loved it. And actually, travel is such a great thing to actually be able to learn a different language and different culture. Everybody should do it. Because you do look at things differently, and you suddenly realize stuff that you think is true just happens to be, that's just how you grew up with it. And so I started to look at things completely different. I think that was a questioning time. Then I did a lot of things on corporate. So I did corporate for many years, hated it.
You had some pretty big successes there. You did some pretty impressive stuff on the corporate end of stuff.
Well, kind of you to say. Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, in terms of corporate career, back in the day, you weren't supposed to do that in more than one industry. And so immediately I said, right, I'm going to get to the top in several industries. And people were saying, you can't do that, which of course is like the best reason to do anything, being told you can't do it. And so I got to the top in various different industries because I just really questioned the way people were doing things. I'm a fan of something like George Bernard Shaw, which basically is, you look at things and say, well, if everybody's thinking that, then actually it should be the opposite or whatever. I found that didn't go down too well in corporate after a time. At first it was quite useful, but I went past my sell-by date. And then I thought,
you were climbing the ladder and you realized the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall.
yeah. But I got to be like, director of in European and American multinationals, and some of these were like world IT director and that kind of stuff. So the titles are impressive, but the actual skills were completely different to what you thought they should be. For example, being an IT director, everybody wants to look at your technical knowledge. And the first thing I actually said to them was, look, I am probably the least qualified person to do this job, and that's why I should do it. And back then, it was never heard of that you're actually able to do a worldwide implementation, because every country is different, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just figured out the way to do it was to talk to everybody. And I said, okay, so if it comes to a project, who are the people in your division that can actually stop it? So I got a list of all the people that could stop stuff. I figured those are the people that are going to be powerful. So then I talked to them and I said, okay, now I need to forewarn you, I'm going to make some real changes here. I said, now what's going to happen is people are going to phone up from the subsidiaries. They're going to say, this is why we shouldn't have that system. And I'm kind of like, and you know what, they're right. And they go, what? What do you mean they're right? I said, yeah, because they're right for the wrong reasons. If you want to actually have a worldwide thing, we actually need to be able to talk to each other and do what needs to be done that. And so it's not about individuals, it's about the bigger picture. And I actually got to the point of saying, okay, by the way, I was like, still didn't know much about IT, still don't. So I figured out these guys are going to get phone calls from people outraged, who are good people in the field, outraged. So I put together a little cheat sheet. And so these people who really didn't want to spend time on us got this thing. I got a phone call from, the guy in Holland who was actually the hotshot guy. And they kind of looked at this and I put down, this is what it's going to say, and here's what you need to say. So it's kind of like actually having a little score for them to do that. Because the thing that I've discovered in all of this is when people put IT systems in, it's never about the technology, it's always about the people. And so actually figuring out that what happens with success, projects aren't successful in the way that we think they should be, or unsuccessful in the way that they should be. So actually looking at those things differently, and then I would talk to other people in the same kind of level of international IT or whatever, and find the same stuff. And I think when it comes to change, of course, the British are very good at resisting all sort of change. An example of that would be in one of the people that was in our group. He was doing some implementation of email for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And so he spent a lot of money doing that, delivered it to the people. And the guy says, oh, so I can get all these messages all the time. Yes, you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait for a pigeon. You don't have to wait for mirror reflex. There were 7 levels of communication which dated back from the 1800s. And so he had the challenge that he put that in, and people said, like, but we're not used to that. If we want to talk to everybody all at the same time, how can we do that? And he said, and then the users came back and said, no, you need to put back in the 7 levels. the whole point of the thing was to get people talking instantly, and be able to communicate fast. And instead it was like, yeah, but we don't really know how to do that. So let's get back to what we know. And so they took this program, which cost hundreds of millions, and basically then spend a few more 100 million on it to end up with practically derailing the whole thing. I think it's a case study that really gets you really thinking about, as a taxpayer in the UK or the US, it's kind of scary.
And so the adage, we've always done it that way, so we can't possibly do something different. And so, you know, as we're working with people, we talk to somebody and we want them to do something, you know, the default being, well, we've always done it this way and that's worked, so why would we do anything different, or we're comfortable or something like that. But that's,
exactly.
Anthony, I think the other thing that you brought up there too, that's really critical here, is laying out that step by step. So part of our goal on this end to help facilitate that stage, or to facilitate that change, is to be very clear on, here's step one, here's step two, here's step three, here's step four, and get them to buy into each step, would you say?
Oh, totally. And I think that's the thing. We need to understand, because the problem with being coaches is we think we know how obvious it is, and anybody in their right mind should be grabbing and biting biting our hand off to get it. But actually what we're doing, even to people who are reasonably enlightened, is we're asking them to trust and put themselves in a position of fear, and then to actually somehow think it's going to come off. And so it's not just, you know, saying like, hey, this product is good for you. We're actually asking them to actually go into a process, to submit to a process which they don't understand, which they haven't started with, and they can only take our word for it, or, you know, perhaps we have a bit more collateral. But the level of trust that needs to be there is colossal. So if we think we're going to make quick sales without realizing that, then we're kind of bucking up the wrong tree. You know, your kid doesn't start to walk like that. They fall over loads of times. You don't say to them like, you stupid kid, that's it, stay in that cot forever. We're kind of patient, and we help them through, and they trust us because they know, or hopefully sense, our love for them. And I think that's what then gets us through with a client sometimes, to get beyond the fear, the anxiousness, the belief that you might be incompetent, the belief that they might be incompetent. You can research anything and find out there's something like 14 reasons why people don't do anything. I learned a lot from just trying to put a system around the world. Do you know how many people actually back then had ever done that? None. And I used to get flown off to Denver to speak on a worldwide thing because I was the guy who put in this call all around the world. Now, bear in mind that that wasn't my skill set. And in fact, I think this is the thing to really be clear that what we think should sell might not. We need to get in the mindset of the person. Perhaps another example there. One of my early clients was a young accountant, and accountants have a typical kind of belief they can do a ton of stuff. And so
I work with a lot of them in one of my business verticals. So yeah, big time.
Yeah, exactly. So I went through all that and got to the point where he became a manager, became a partner. The jump from manager to partner is a big one, because everybody knows about this stuff. They don't know that what's it go from manager to partner. People can't actually articulate that. And then when he got to that point, he said, I might be a shop for the managing partner, but I'm the worst accountant here. So I said, do you know what? That's perfect, because that's exactly why you should be the managing partner, because you're the worst accountant there. It's got what? Yeah, because the rest of them can't manage people. He was very good with people. I said, you've got the people skills, don't do the other stuff. That will, if you try and be an accountant, that's the worst thing you can do. You need to stick with what you're good at and play for your truth. And he became a very good managing partner. And they used to literally win awards on the basis of they were actually being managed by a people person, not an accountant. So, that's, I think, an interesting thing to actually help change somebody's idea of what is important and what they're good at, and to help make them relevant to wherever the world is now, is a very powerful thing. That's one of the best things that we can do as a coach, to actually help people understand what they are good at and what their whole is and where they actually belong in the world. That is a tremendous gift. I don't think we should be so reticent about telling people about it. Sorry, it's just something on a soapbox. Sorry about that.
Well, I think this is important for the conversation as well, because as we talk about change, how do we elicit change, or how do we actualize change? Partly it is somebody oftentimes from the outside. I want to talk about internal changes too with you, Anthony, but let's talk about on the outside as well. Is somebody else's ability, if it's us talking to somebody, to find what they're missing, or as you've recognized this person, he doesn't make a good accountant, so he might as well jump up to that next level. But because he's touched on accounting,
Yeah,
right, it's not being the best accountant that's going to help in that next level. It's something else.
yeah.
And your ability to find that something else, what is that something else? What is that other possibility?
Yes.
So
I think, yeah, possibility, and I think it's also it's something to do with desire, because it's useless, as we all know, trying to get anybody to do anything unless they just got some kind of desire to it. So actually being able to help people with the thing that they desire, and it may even be out of their reach or whatever, that really floats my boat. But I'm not going to invest time in anybody unless they really want something. What's the point of that? And I think this is the point where we can get really frustrated in business, in family, whatever, by seeing so clearly. If somebody could just see this and get rolling with it, they'd be happy, other people would be happy. It would be a quadruple win, okay? And to actually, you have to calm down and say, okay, they may not move as fast as me. They may not be so clear. I need to actually paint that a line at a time, putting on the undercoat, the primer, and all that kind of stuff until all that, until you've done all those different things. Then guess what? You can't just say, oh gosh, nobody cares, nobody wants me, or whatever, or my life is useless, or anything like that. You actually have to get into their world and break down the technology into their understanding of what's going on.
And so let's unpack that a bit. One of the things that you said there, I've been reminded of by one of the people that I look to as one of my personal mentors. And on a recent interview that he did, he was talking about, when you get an objection, our typical response, we're talking to somebody and we've presented whatever we got to present, and it says, well, what about this? And our immediate response is to answer the objection.
Yeah.
When the opposite is actually true, is really more or less agree with their objection, stop for a moment, breathe, right? Because if you start answering somebody's objections, you kind of get into an adversarial position with them. And now you're like a barrister or a lawyer, right? Arguing in court. And there's no, you're been in court, there's no winners. Come on. So it's stopping for a moment. Okay. I agree with their objection to the change. Yeah, I can absolutely understand that. Step back for a moment. And then, as you said so brilliantly, Anthony, is paint, start painting it one line at a time. I want to kind of highlight that. So not 10 lines at a time, right? Don't come back with them with 10 things, right? Let's step back and let's just find one thing that we can get some clarity on. Would you say?
Yeah, totally. In fact, you can put this into any sales situation, even say used car market or something like that, where I think I went to, I'm not a used car person, but I saw a car, I wanted to buy it. I looked at the book, it was, I don't know, say back then, a couple of thousand or whatever. But I also read that they had an expensive service that needed to be done. So I thought, well, I don't want to buy it and then have that. So I went to see it, and I took that, and she said, well, this car's worth, whatever it is, back then, 2,200, whatever. And I said, absolutely, in prime condition, and looking in the book, I would absolutely agree with that. Now, here's the challenge I have, that actually there's not a certification of the service, and although that is, perhaps asking a bit more, but right now I have to go home and justify this to my wife.
Has anybody ever heard that? I need to talk to my spouse. Right?
It's reverse selling.
Right?
But the great thing is, she said, oh, absolutely. So the thing was, I think what you, if I might slightly embroider that point a little, when we dismiss other people's objections, we are dismissing them. And they are probably saying something.
Anthony, stop for a moment. I want to repeat that. When we dismiss somebody's objections, we dismiss them.
Yeah.
Have you ever had somebody in a process say, hey, just trust me on this? Or somebody says, oh, that's not a big deal. Hey, it's the wrong color. Oh, hey, that's not a big deal. Or, I don't quite see how this works for me. Trust me on this. It'll work out, right?
Yeah.
Anybody been there? Has anybody been guilty themselves of saying something like that?
That is the worrying thing, when you realize you might have done it yourself.
So the practice then is to stop.
Yeah.
Breathe, take a moment, and absolutely come into their world from their side of the table to totally understand their objection and the validity of it, correct? Because it's absolutely valid in their world. It's not trivial. It's not, and we do a great disservice to them to brush it off or to use some canned answer.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, just given that we're kind of free ranging a bit here, I think that's true. One of the best examples of communication, I think, there's two. One is the peace in Northern Ireland. One is the dismantling of apartheid in South Africa. Okay, and to actually get those things to happen, there was a lot of communication needed to happen. And I actually found this with clients, that sometimes in their relationships, they would all get into a mess and people get upset and all the rest of it. I said, the thing is to understand that not all conversations are the same. That's the mistake. If we're having a conversation about different things and they're all the same, so what? We're not giving any platform or any acknowledgement. Okay, so you have to say, okay, talks about talks. You actually have to talk about, okay, when we have the talk, this is what we're going to talk about, this is what it's going to mean, and this is what we like to do as this first stage. Is that okay for you? Okay. And then you build on that, and you build on that, and you build on that. There's a whole kind of methodology which my wife and I over time have kind of developed, and it works for us. It might not work for everybody, but this whole idea of the problem with communication is usually the illusion that it's happened, as Bernard would say. So you actually have to take time so the person feels heard, feels justified, avoid all the kind of non-linguistic tricks we have to send meanings about that's a stupid point, or you're an idiot, or whatever, or we think that's important. All those things are off the table. You have to get in a thing, you're talking to equals. And to do that, you don't want to laud it as, oh no, that's wrong, or whatever. That doesn't help.
A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
You got it. And I think the most, what's the thing that we can do as coaches is actually get people in touch with their own brilliance and to make them confident enough to go and ask for it and feel that they deserve it. That is a fantastic gift to give anybody. And so anything that detracts from that, we should eliminate from our process.
Can we unpack our internal change then? You know, because there again, as we're trying to elicit somebody else to change, and in our side ourselves, how do we empower internal change, or what are some things that, you know, maybe as you've experienced and that cause you to make a regroup or something like that? So what happens that gets us to move off the needle?
I think this whole idea of getting into somebody else's world, it's more than just talking like them or whatever. It's actually having a feeling for where they're at, to want them to be successful, to feel it in your fiber of your being, because people can tell the difference. It's the amazing thing is we have all kinds of different ways of communicating. But to actually want something to happen, we need to be full throttle, 100% lined up with that. And this, I think,
How do we do that inside of ourselves?
I think it starts with all the kind of things that you need to do to look after yourself. Okay, and I think this is the thing to start. All the training I went to in corporate was always starting from there's something wrong that needs to be fixed. Okay, the real exciting thing, which I think has come up in recent years, and a friend of mine has been involved with this, is to start from a different place, which starts from, okay, you are adequate, more than adequate. Okay, you don't need to add anything to be added to you. Okay, you start from that place. Now, if that's a possibility, what can you work on? So you've actually, you actually come with them. In the old days, it'd be taking them out on the balcony and have a chat, you know. But I think this is exactly what we need to do. We actually need to almost get side by side and say, hey, buddy, look at this view. Isn't it fabulous? What do you think of it? What do you think that it could do for you? What would you prepare to do, etc., etc. The conversation is completely different because you're not trying to, you know, as you say, convince them against their will. You're actually saying, hey, come have a look. Isn't this interesting? And if they just say, oh, you know, a load of rubbish or whatever, well, you know what you're dealing with or not. But hopefully over time, because of your reputation of and who you mix with, because, oh yeah, they know that you're actually trying to come from the right place. Even if you got it totally wrong or whatever, you're starting from a different place. The platform, the whole idea of any sale is it's done before you actually walk in the room, because you are in the right place and mentally prepared, and you actually think it through, and you have a confidence about you that it's not phony. These are all the things that people buy. They will not buy when they sense that you don't know how you're going to make it happen, or you can make it happen. They've got to use your belief to get over their gap.
Awesome. Questions? Does that bring up any ideas, comments, questions from any of you? How can we unpack this so it's absolutely usable? I want to make sure there's no ambiguity here as far as being able to change ourselves Okay, step one, and have that power to bring that change to others so we don't miss it. Miss the subtleties or the nuances of it, because they are very subtle.
I have,
Nancy, how are you doing?
hi, I'm good.
We haven't talked in a long time, my friend.
I know that time slot is many times taken up with other things, but here I'm doing double
You're
duty,
here.
waiting for the nurse to change
Yep.
my mom's dressing,
Mhm.
but here I am. I have so much to say on this, and the one thing is some of the study and being someone's personal assistant for a while, a woman who trains other therapists in her version of play therapy.
Mhm.
So she's just looking at kiddos, and there's a couple things. One is when all behavior has meaning, and I learned that from somewhere else, and it works in the dementia world really well. The other thing is people set you up to feel how they're feeling. Kiddos do this. They call it the setup. That can be an interesting thing to note as a coach. The other thing is when
Stop. I want to kind of repeat that because I don't want to run past that because that's big. People set you up to feel
to
how they're feeling.
feel how they're feeling. So like I worked with a coach not long ago, and we spent a lot of time together, and I was in his training program, and I'm not now, which is fine for both of us, but he had, messaged me how frustrated he felt, that he felt like he couldn't help me. And I sent him a link to this Lisa Dion is the play therapist person, to a video that's called The Setup. And then he understood the frustration he was feeling was the frustration I feel when I'm not able to get clear and progress my dreams, have my behavior be congruent with the things that I say I want to do. So if you're with somebody and you start to feel trapped, guess what? They might be feeling trapped. I have another experience where that happened clearly, and I'm a massage therapist, and I think of that with clients. Some of the stuff that comes up for me may be coming up from them. In fact, there's a part of your brain called the insula. Our insulas speak to each other. Yeah, we have a gut feeling and all this, but science now knows our insulas are speaking to each other. And at some point you can, if you're really regulated first, put the mask on first, you have the ability to help the person you're with regulate. It's called co-regulation. Another coach I have calls it, you're lending them your ego. And Anthony, when you're saying that you come in prepared and certain about what you have to offer and how you have to offer that, you're sending off those signals in many ways. And we don't just have 5 senses, we have like 108 or more. I mean, even more in the body. You've got pressure senses, temperature sensors, just the whole gamut. And so the setup was the one point I was how I went onto that. But the other piece that's important to that is, wow, that's a brilliant strategy. When someone tells me, oh yeah, that's a pattern you learned and it's not serving you anymore, I want to get out my hatchet. And when I've worked with Lisa one-on-one in a coaching role, just wow, that's a brilliant strategy. Holding extra weight is a brilliant strategy. all these things we do can be reframed, and not just reframed. They are strategies, and they're actually really brilliant. Then when you're coming in from that way, you're not making yourself wrong, which then sets up that whole adversarial thing you're talking about, and the behavior has meaning behind it.
Yeah.
And it's, you somewhere in the survival and protection realm.
Brilliant. Nancy, thank you. Keep going. This is really good.
The other thing with this is, if you've looked at your values, and I don't mean morals and ethics. In fact, studies have shown there's no one code that is immoral, and it's really culture driven. And same with fears. Maybe a fear of heights is inborn, maybe not. But anyway, set that aside. What everyone has a set of values. It's fingerprint specific. It's your iris specific. And our disagreements are values clashes. I prefer vanilla. You prefer chocolate. When you're working with a client, when you know what their top 3 values are, and for instance, people who don't have a lot of money is probably saving money and building wealth is probably not in their top 3 to 5 values. Family can be really high on values. Building a business can be really high on someone's values. It doesn't mean that family is not important, but their business is hugely important. For me, healing, I've been fascinated with the healing arts since I was a little kid. I'm not the best at it. I've got health problems, and yet my life demonstrates this throughout the decades. Music and singing, I've done a little bit professionally, but that is pretty important to me. If I'm going to go out, it's probably going to be to see live music or go to a singer's jam. What I watch on TV. So when people write out their values or think what their values are, usually what they put on there is injected values, things they think should be their values. And I don't mean honesty and integrity. I'm not talking about that. I prefer I prefer pepperoni pizza over whatever, or I'm completely vegetarian, or I'm vegan. And see, I'm saying your highest values are wrapped up in your identity. I'm a mother. I'm a business owner. You can change your values, and this is one of the things that my coaching is trying to be based around, is helping people change their hierarchy of values, their priority. We do things from the most important to the least important. And if you don't fill your day with high priority values, it gets filled with low priority kind of distractions. So I'm in the process of the low priority, just getting by, to go, how can I spend more time doing what's really interesting to me, which is like this, to speak to you guys. I mean, I do this with massage clients, and sometimes it's really great. And sometimes, I wish the people wish the massage therapist would shut up, because this isn't a coaching session or a seminar, but sometimes it is. So that's the values, the setup, the behavior being a brilliant strategy, learning how to communicate my values in terms of your values. Yeah, come on, let's go on this trip. And guess what? There'll be a spa there, and you can go and have a massage and soak in the tub, and then go see live music. So I may be going, but guess what? I'm going to wake up. All of a sudden, I don't feel so tired because it's in my values. And then the blood glucose and oxygen goes to the forebrain.
So when we're working with people, And let's talk about the people that maybe are out in the stratosphere out here that we want to bring in to our bucket, into our tribe, into our group or whatever. You know, Morris is really good at headlines and stuff. And he's the podcast master, and he's recently had a lot of success with open rates on emails and stuff like that. And I love that, all that technical stuff, and we get into that. But you know, we also have to recognize that sometimes, you know, is that headline speaking to that, as Nancy's, you're saying, that higher value, and we don't know what that is unless we're really in tune, right? And where you can't necessarily copy and paste over from here to here, because like you could be speaking over here and you're talking vanilla, and you don't realize that's a chocolate loving crowd. It's just like, you're just like, what's not working? But it worked over here, but you were speaking to a vanilla loving crowd. So there's all these subtleties out there that just are all over the place, and on our ability to maybe step back ourselves, right? Recognize it in ourselves first, breathe, try to find it in others. Would you say that would sum it up?
That's a good sum up. And knowing your own values is your top 3 to 5 values is super important. And I'm getting a lot of this, if you want to know, from John DeMartini. And he has a free values determination thing. But my other way to do it is look at what you spend your money on for the month. Look at how you spend your time. Just look at your calendar. So then you're not going to fool yourself and saying, oh, this is really important to me. If losing weight was that important, the person would have done it.
Can you say that again? Nancy, that is massive brilliance. Say that one more time. I just want to make sure everybody just resonates with what she just said.
If losing weight were that important, you already would have done it, or your life would be demonstrating all these things, not just talking about them and planning for it, but actually doing it, doing the shopping that supports that, doing the movement or whatever, your portion control, whatever works for you. I've trained in a thing called Never Binge Again, which teaches people how to stop binging and overeating. And one of the things it does is say, here's a rule. I will never brush my teeth at night again without doing a hypothetical meal plan for the next day beforehand.
Really anchoring it into something tangible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good anchor. But if it's, I will never eat dairy again, say, now when I get my mind starts saying, oh, come on, you can have a little cup of ice cream right now. They're handing them out.
Mm-hmm.
You can go ahead and do it. Come on, it's free. You're not even paying for it. Just, it won't matter. And then, so then you say, well, now why should I be doing that? And then go, oh, just because it's free is neither here nor there.
Mm-hmm.
I have money to buy good food. So then the refutation process, I teach people how to do more powerful refutations, which is, again, changing your values, wiring and unwiring. And you have, I know this is a little technical, but you have glial cells that glom on to your neural connections like glue. And the more you have associations, the more you're creating the glue to a new behavior or an old behavior that you'll just keep on doing it. One way to change it is to create hundreds, if not thousands, of associations, new behaviors that you connect to your 3 highest values. Now, I don't know how we got off onto that tangent.
Because we tapped into Nancy's brilliance. So, part of the goal for me here is to move us all forward. Okay. So I have a little bit of an agenda here. Okay. Is that you guys are on my tribe, and I want to make sure that that as a tribe, we are tapping into our own genius, number one. And I want to make sure that we have access and are tapping into each other's genius, because at the end of the day, that's crazy powerful. So Nancy, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for interjecting, because it was perfect. Anthony, I want to give kudos to you, because you kind of spurred this conversation on as we were going back and forth, you know, and Anthony has been a very influential person in the background for me in poking me on stuff, and just full disclosure. And there's a lot to unpack there. So we're going to run out of time here, but I want to close with basically kudos to you. As we sit here, I want to make sure that you're always reflecting on this stuff. I will post this video, you know, online. Look for it, listen to it again, because you're going to hear some different things when you hear it again. Okay. And I'm going to challenge you to face the mirror in the morning with that big word change. Am I open to change? Am I responsive to change? Am I willing to change? Okay. And as you engage with people, be sensitive to that aspect of change. And if you're not having results, maybe it's your inability to facilitate them. Be honest with yourself and seek some help to be more sensitive to that. Does that make sense? It's massively valued. Anthony, what would be the best way for people to engage with you? Would be your LinkedIn account or your website? How do we get a hold of Anthony Warren?
Just standard Gmail account, Anthony D. Warren @gmail.com.
Excellent.
That's ANTH, Anthony.
Thank you, my friend.